Okay, we're getting started with the classroom. And this is Dr. Annette Feravich here with the Bookless Classroom. Remember what the Bookless Classroom is? The Bookless Classroom is you can come here without a book. I will supply the book. So even if you're eating breakfast or in the middle of whatever you're in the middle of, you don't have to have anything to come to the Bookless Classroom. The only thing I thought maybe you might want is a piece of paper. It's always good to have a piece of paper so we learn using many different senses, not just one sense, our ears, right? But other senses, our eyes, touch, because we're writing, right? So we have different visuals now that we see, not just what I'm presenting, but what you're writing. And I always remembered what I was writing by the color of the pen that I would use. So I wasn't always into highlighting everything, although some people are. Just don't make a job of it, right? It's not your job to have 6 different pens organized before you have to start taking in information, right? So don't make it a job. Don't make it a chore to have highlights. But if that's the way you do it, because here's the thing about it. The color helps you remember what you wrote. And it's not just the color, it can be the way you wrote it. So if you wrote it in cursive, like I usually do, but you printed this out, so your mind, the mental image that you have is that you put this in all capital letters, that information, or you put a star by it, 3 stars by it. The mental image that you have now helps really support the memory of whatever you're trying to learn, right? So remember, we try and learn things using many different senses, not just our hearing. Because in particular, I don't know. It's really interesting to me what do we learn from the best, right? Do we learn from our eyes, what we see? We know we get stuff wrong all the time when we just rely on our sight, right? Because we know this from the law, that if we have one person who is an eyewitness, the law says that's pretty good. But what we find out as far as what eyewitnesses know and remember is really, really bad, really bad. So we need lots of other evidence is what we need. And we get that by using many of our different senses, right? Sometimes we remember faces well, but I've noticed lately that I've been distinguishing people who look alike by their bodies. We need to know their body shape as well. So it's kind of interesting how all of those things help play into our memories. All right, let's get going. We are here in the Bookless Classroom. And today we were going to talk about, if you remember, we were going to talk about the Oregon Trail, but instead we are talking about the Trail of Tears. And along with that, I'm getting the book here behind me. That's the reason why I put that whole screen up there. My flowers aren't doing as well as I want them to be, although they are stunningly beautiful. And now, here we are. Although I don't remember what page we left off on. Do you? Yeah, they had the alphabet, and we looked at the Cherokee Supreme Court building right there, right? And we reread the part about Andrew Jackson, a president I clearly am not impressed with. George Washington, very impressed. Thomas Jefferson, it seems like I'm learning more and more about Thomas Jefferson. He wrote the Constitution. But interestingly enough, Thomas Jefferson, we talk a lot about whether or not people want a stronger or weaker federal government. We're going to talk about that too. Today. So today they say, what do we say? Do we want states to have the power, or do we want the federal government to have the power? Well, when we see that we've got a bunch of clowns in Congress, We say, let the states have their power. But that's not what George Washington wanted. And so we're going to talk about that when we get to George Washington. Very impressed. I'm very impressed with our first president, who was, as we said, a military man who took an oath as well. So an oath meant something. We're going to take a look at that presidential oath, I think, as well. I've got it. I don't have that. I have to write that down. Not that I'm using my notes for anything at all so far. But yeah, we'll do that in a minute. So I've got some notes on the president right now, and so we're going to get started with George Washington, but we also have to get into how they began, right? How this Congress began. And in fact, I do have a book. I think I have a book. Yeah, no, I know. If I don't have it, I ordered it. One of the two, so I'm going to get it. So I bought 17 more of these books. I'm so impressed. Cornerstones of Freedom. 17 more of these books I bought. And I hope that the writer actually is a conservative, and also does this as a hobby. But they were published in the Library of Congress with your tax dollars. So I hope it's good stuff. And so far it seems like it's good stuff to me, right? Okay, and so then, yes, we did read this as well, right? So Governor George Gilmer summed up his feelings about the land treaties with the Indians in this statement. Treaties were expedients that, I'm going to use a different word that you don't know. It hastens things. It speeds them up is what it does. That means speeds them up. It hastens things, speeds things up. Treaties were expedients by which ignorant, intractable, and savage people were induced without bloodshed to yield up what civilized people had a right to possess. What made them think they had a right to possess that land? And not only do they feel that they had a right to possess that land, but they felt that they could trick the Indians out of it by writing treaties. They could trick them out of it. They wouldn't have to go to war or have any bloodshed, right? Kind of seems like what we did to some of these third world countries, right? As we're building on their lands, our agriculture, right? Seems like maybe we tricked them out of their land. I don't know. So we see history repeating itself. What do you think is going to happen? All right. And this is where we left off. So I'm going to start right here again and get my glasses. Actually, I'm going to start on the previous page. That's where we'll start. Look at that. Look at that. You think I'm disorganized? Whatevs. There's my glasses. Proves I'm organized. Let's see how dirty they look. Yeah. You just can't be reading a book with fingerprints all over your glasses on camera. I mean, you can. It's just not a good look. That's all I'm saying. My mom read everything with fingerprints all over her glasses. And it was endearing is what it was. It was one of the most endearing things. I find glasses to be endearing across the board. Anyone who pushes up their glasses, I don't find it endearing when I do it, but I sure have always found it endearing when I saw other people do it. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. I just had, just a memory flashback just now. Is what I just did. I hope it comes back to me later on at a more convenient time. It was kind of interesting, if I do say so myself. Eventually, a Cherokee lawsuit reached the United States Supreme Court, the highest court in the land. Oh, we read this, right? We read this. And basically, Andrew Jackson was like, what are you going to do, Supreme Court? Let's see you do something, right? Oh my gosh. Talk about the president giving the big middle finger to the justices, right? Oh my gosh. Eventually, a Cherokee lawsuit reached the United States Supreme Court, the highest court in the land. After a series of decisions, the court ruled in 1832 that the federal government must protect the Cherokee Nation from its many intruders, but only the President of the United States had the authority to send troops to ward off the invaders of the Cherokee land. At the time, President Jackson was preparing for his second term. He refused to help Indians in a conflict against whites. Also, Supreme Court Justice John Marshall was his political enemy. In a historic defiance of the Supreme Court's authority, President Jackson proclaimed John Marshall has rendered his decision. Now let him enforce it. Wow. John Marshall, head of the Supreme Court, right? Moreover, and so this is the reason why we have issues, right? We've got our three branches of government, which we will talk about. So we've got, in order so that every part of government, like the judges, they don't have so much power because the executive office basically is in charge of the troops. Okay? And then we have the lawmakers who then decide to make the law based on what the Supreme Court justice said. Congress, right? So we've got Congress, we've got the executive branch, and we've got the judges. So we'll talk about those three branches, all right? So here is where we are seeing, we've already got the Supreme Court. So we've got the president, and we have Congress. How did that all come about? We're going to be talking about that when we talk about the president, okay? But you can see how one place doesn't have too much power. But boy, oh boy, that's a lot of power when Andrew Jackson can command the military. That's a lot of power when the person in charge can command the military. Wow. When we think about that and what is going on right now, right, with when we talk about that with January 6th, with what happened on January 6th, right? So what happened? Well, we had a president who was trying to command the military. Everybody else might say, we don't want this. But if he commands the military is under the direction of the president. He is the commander in chief. Wow. So we see how these powers play out right here. That's really a cool thing to see. We'll talk more about it. It's a little confusing. It might be a little confusing. It's even a little confusing for me right now because I was not prepared to talk about that right now, right? I wasn't prepared to talk about it. So I sound like I'm really smart about it. I know some things about it, right? I wasn't prepared to talk about it though. Interesting. Moreover, President Jackson considered even harsher methods of dealing with Indians. For almost 3 decades, government leaders had discussed a plan called Indian removal. It called for the removal by force, if necessary, of all Indians east of the Mississippi River. The Indians were to be resettled on land west of the river. Actually, this form of migration had been going on for generations. Many northern tribes had already quietly retreated westward in order to avoid further conflicts with the whites. But in the South, the 5 civilized tribes clung tenaciously to their territories while white frontiersmen demanded their removal. So here we've got the 5 civilized tribes who are thinking that We've been cooperating with these whites for a very long time, and so we are going to hopefully be part of this new generation of people who are settling the land. And Andrew Jackson had, this is John Marshall. This is John Marshall, not Andrew Jackson. This is Governor George, the governor of Georgia, Governor George Gilmore. It just is so interesting to me because I keep finding that the people in government just remain in government. I keep thinking about people who are in government right now who have similar names to these people, and they would have similar attitudes as well. So knowing our history is really extremely important, even to understand the individuals. Who was their uncle? Who was their father? Who was their grandfather? And I started with uncle. Seems kind of weird, right? I don't know why I said that first. I'm not quite sure. But we probably want to know extended family as well. We want to know what is going on in extended family because we know weirdo stuff happens, to extended family. And just because, we need to know that stuff. We need to know surnames. There was an emphasis on surnames, last names, because that told me everything. If I said Dahmer to you, wouldn't that tell you a whole lot about your family? Now, that's unfortunate for anyone's last name whose last name is Dahmer. And that's probably why so many people today are changing their names and we don't know who they are, right? Because they don't want to be associated with past people who might be considered white supremacists, for example, like Andrew Jackson, clearly like Andrew Jackson. It doesn't mean that others didn't own slaves. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the attitude of white supremacy. And those are two different things. Owning slaves was a timely thing. White supremacy is an attitude, just like we're talking about, that we are better than you. And we'll show you by playing our cards just perfectly. With the army and with the judges, you don't stand a chance. You don't stand a chance. But I'm saying that that's the way that they felt. The white supremacists felt. And I believe that they feel that way right now, too. That they believe that they have the powers and that other people don't stand a chance. But that just isn't true. They just really don't know their history. And they really don't know the spirit of the people, right? They really don't know the spirit of the people. They're trying to change the spirit of the people by erasing history. I'm here. I'm here for you. I got this. Don't worry. We're not erasing history. As long as the cornerstones of freedom got it right, we're okay. And I think that this was actually written. Let's take a look at when this was written. Why don't I have... Seriously? Oh, there it is. Right over here. Okay, so I did read it. It's like in the tiniest print ever. But it does actually have... There are references here. There are actually references. In that tiny, tiny print, they have references there. I just realized that because I read it the first time without my glasses on. But now there are references. And this is amazing, actually. There it is. There it is. So this copyright is 1998. And maybe that was the very first one, but I don't think it was. I can't read the print. I'm sorry. Did I just wreck the whole story for you? Because the reason why I spent so much time is because one of them I saw that I could actually read the prints said 1977 on it. So these are, remember, part of this is that we are supposed to be taking a look at the value of this information. Is this information true? And now the problem with all of this false information that everyone is receiving is that now we have to go back and with a microscope look at whatever is true, because everything now is suspect. Everything is suspect. Raising the question of Indian removal, President Jackson told Congress, "I suggest for your consideration the propriety of setting apart an ample district west of the Mississippi to be guaranteed to the Indian tribes as long as they shall occupy it." Jackson's pioneer supporters cheered every word. Under his leadership, the Indian Removal Act became law of the land. I saw this here. So a copyright for the Indian Removal Act over here. Now, I'm not going to here. Cherokee removal, 1838. Cherokee. There are other things. So right here in this little teeny tiny print, maybe you could see it and blow it up there on the screen, actually, even, honestly, because I could see it almost better right there. I can see it better right there. So on the screen, so you'll be able to see that copy right there and get an idea of what they're saying with the Cherokee Indian Removal Act. I am just mortified. I am mortified, and I still did not get that. And I really do need. I want to get that Indian Removal Act. I found the George Washington's farewell speech online. So I'm pulling some of those lines out when I talk about George Washington, because although, Washington did not write his own speech, right? Somebody else, no, likely at that time, he probably did write his own speech. He didn't probably have speechwriters. Today we have speechwriters. But you can see people still give speeches in their own character, and people write and choose speechwriters to make sure that they're writing their own character. So these farewell addresses or speeches that we have of presidents or important individuals, they might be military individuals, right? We had General Colin Powell give lots of press conferences during the Desert Storm, right? During Desert Storm, so the initial Iraqi war. So lots of words that were directly from that general. So even military people, we would have those kinds of words, literal words from them, right? So we are trying to, in critical thinking classroom in particular, we are really examining where are we getting the information from. So I pause here, not to do the full examination that we do in critical thinking classroom, but in order for you to think about that here in the Bookless classroom, okay? A feeling of gloom hung like a stubborn fog over the Cherokee Nation. Many people simply could not believe the Indian Removal Act had actually been passed by Congress. Oh, I know that feeling. I know that feeling when you're just like, yeah, that can't happen. That can't happen that guy's going to become president. That can't. What? What? Reminds me of an Eddie Murphy thing that he did about going into the voting booth. What? Basically. But they didn't vote on this. And this is very interesting to me about how Congress makes and passes laws regardless of the popular opinion or popular vote. So it feels very much when Congress does this, makes and passes laws, it feels very much like the people don't have a voice, right? Like Congress seems to have way too much power. Something's going on with this power that we have to figure out today. But when we read these kind of examples, it helps us figure it out a little bit more. The Cherokee land had been guaranteed to the tribe by a treaty endorsed by the federal government. Cherokee people had lived there for countless generations before the coming of the whites. Also, the Cherokee were a community of farmers, not nomadic hunters, who could pack up and move at the government's decree. So that's an interesting thing to think about as well. They're farmers, so they had land. That's where their living came from. How are they supposed to get just what? Other land? In the middle of what? Where are the crops? Where's my donkey? Where's, whatever. So it'd be like you having to pick up and move to a strange place. You have all this stuff in your home. You have, a community, maybe. A debate raged among tribal leaders. One leader, John Ross, wanted to fight removal through the courts. Another, the elderly Major Ridge, urged the people to move to the west because he felt that President Jackson's position was unshakable. You got no choice. Hundreds of Cherokee families made plans to hide in caves in the remote hills. Others simply gave up and trekked to the west before they were ordered to do so. Let's take a look at these pictures before I move on. Cherokee leaders John Ross on the right. Oh, no. Right. And Major Ridge, far right. Oh, John Ross, Major Ridge, far right. Miners rushed to the scene after gold was discovered at Dahlonega, Georgia, in the heart of Cherokee territory. So that's what they wanted. That's what the people wanted. So the people were okay with the government shooing the Indians out as if it were just a simple shoo, right? We're going to find out a little bit more because it was a trail of tears, so they just weren't simply shooing them out, right? You don't get the name Trail of Tears for nothing, right? I will collect all of your tears in a bottle. That's somebody who cares about your tears. That is somebody who cares about your tears, right? Every one of your tears, and wants to know the reason for every tear if they collected it. What was this tear for? What was this tear for? What was this tear for? Trail of Tears. So the individuals, to me, became very complacent with Andrew Jackson's racist attitude. They were complacent with it. Why? Because they were getting gold. That's the reason why. Maybe I wouldn't complain about a law that shooed people away if I had gold right next door, right? If there was gold right next door, I might not. I'm just thinking. They're trying to shoo me off my property. Is there gold there in them there hills? Okay. Hundreds of Cherokee families made plans to hide in caves in remote hills. Others simply gave up. Right. Meanwhile, Georgia authorities and the land-hungry white frontiersmen lay like vultures outside the Cherokee boundaries. Even while the many cases were being argued in court, the state of Georgia organized a lottery to distribute Cherokee land. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Where else were they casting lots? When else were they casting lots? Oh dear goodness gracious, Cherokee people. I'm thinking all of a sudden a song is going through my head, which is by Cher, if you don't know. And it is. Well, it's Cherokee People. I think that's the name of the song. Look it up. Really, really good song. She really sings it with a lot of heart and soul. She really does. As if she might have people that she knows that are part of this land. Wow. Cherokee land. Lucky winners were given 160-acre farms or 40-acre mining sites. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Oh, can we just take a breath? Think about that. Even if you're in 5th and 6th grade or 4th or 3rd grade, think about what I just said. So here is all kinds of free land. Imagine if there were all kinds of free land. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I just feel like this is going on right now. I do. And they're casting lots. And they're being given. Do you think that you might be able to make a farm with a 160-acre farm? And I'm sorry, were they shooing off farmers? So maybe they actually got farms, like not just land to farm, but they actually got farms. And remember what they said. They said that they felt that they had a right to this, to cheat the people out of their land. Why? Why? Because they had a right to do that. That is white supremacy 101. Wow. And see how he works, that I did not even, I had the choice of 2 books and I started reading the other. Somebody said, that one's going to bore you to tears. Read this one and know why I collect tears in bottles, and tell people that I will collect your tears in bottles. What? What up? And 160 acre farms, which is large. I don't need that large of a land if I'm going to mine it for gold. 40 acres to mine that site for gold or whatever precious metals are there is good enough for me. How could I possibly mine 80 acres or 160 acres? I can't. I'll take my 40 acres of gold. Oh my gosh, or precious metals. Okay, my light went off. In all the excitement, my light is like, whoa, cool off. We gotta cool down. What? The light is like, I'm out of here. I've heard enough. Stop reading. No more light on this topic. Yikes. All to be parceled out just as soon as the Indians were forced off their territory. A popular song of the time began with words, all I want in this creation is a pretty little wife and a big plantation way down yonder in Cherokee Nation. I'm not kidding you. The disgust is rising up in my belly. I'm not kidding you. I'm not kidding you. Oh my gosh. I have to laugh to stop me from actually getting sick. This is white supremacy, and that's what it does to women. It wants to make us throw up in our mouths. Oh my gosh. In other parts of the South, Georgia, I'm telling you, straighten up. This is your roots right there. Who does he look like? Let's find out who he looks like. No, don't find out who he looks like. Just a teeny tiny picture right there. But there's bigger ones. There's bigger ones. Wow. In other parts of the South, the Indian Removal Act crushed the 5 civilized tribes. During the bitter winter of 1831, the migration of the Choctaw began. Many were barefoot, and most had no coats or blankets. I don't know why that was necessary. Yet they were forced to cross the Mississippi River in 0-degree weather. The federal government had agreed to feed and clothe the Indians during their journey, but money for the provisions was never sent. The Creek were driven out of their homes in 1836. Those who resisted were put in chains and marched double file by United States soldiers. Some 3,500 Creek who started the trek died of hunger and exposure before they reached their new territory. In 1837, the Chickasaw loaded their belongings into wagons and began their sad journey westward. Masholatubi, chief of Choctaw, at the time of their removal from the southeast. How interesting. How interesting that we have that picture, isn't it? Isn't that interesting that we could have that picture? Of the so-called five civilized tribes, only Seminole used warfare to resist the American government's order to move westward. So that's what that picture is right here, this picture here. And this one here, a painting portraying the Choctaw removal. Who did that painting? It's probably in those references there. I wish they put that right on the picture, right? I probably need to be more prepared to do that with my stuff as well, so that people know where it came from. Because at this time, somebody was moved enough to actually paint a picture of not just any Indians, not just of Indian removal, but specifically of Choctaw. Interesting. How could you have one child survive? How could you have one child survive? This is a book made for middle school kids. Only the Seminole chose to fight. However, after a long and bloody war, most members of that tribe were herded to the west as well. By battling through the courts, the Cherokee people resisted migration until 1838. That year, however, the federal government acted on a treaty agreement that had been made 2 years earlier. Its terms gave away all Cherokee lands east of the Mississippi in exchange for new lands in the west and a cash settlement. But the agreement had been signed by only a tiny minority of the Cherokee people. Some of the signers had been bribed by government officials. Still, federal government insisted that the treaty was valid. You know, when you think about it, the only people who probably got any of that are the people who signed the treaty. What else were you going to do? If you wanted those provisions from the federal government, you had to sign the treaty. So what would you do? What would you do? Some of the signers had been bribed by government officials. Still, federal government insisted that the treaty was valid. The month of May 1838 was the beginning of a long nightmare for Cherokee people. General Winfield Scott, who would later run for president, led an army of 700 troops into Cherokee territory, nearly one soldier for every 2 Cherokee. Without warning, the troops burst into Cherokee homes, dragged the people outside, and drove them towards staging camps. Anyone moving too slowly was prodded by a soldier's bayonet. Steve Avery, what's on your property? Following almost on the heels of the soldiers came neighboring whites who swept up the Cherokees' personal possessions just as soon as the soldiers had forced the Indians from their homes. Like pirates, the whites stuffed sacks with pots, pans, silverware, and musical instruments, all looted from Cherokee houses and cabins. Fist fights, knife fights, and pistol duels broke out over the booty. Some of the whites, so here the booty is the reward, right? We know booty as something different, don't we? I know we're middle school kids, and most of us probably know booty as being something a little different. No, it's not. No, it's not. It is, but it's not. Right? A reward is a reward, whether it's booty, which is loot, or whether it's booty. Some of the whites, knowing that the Indians often buried their dead with gold and silver jewelry, dug up graves and sifted through decaying corpses, searching for treasure. Mysteries, I think I might have some Indian treasure on my property. Indian gravesite. On June 16, 1838, a Baptist minister named Evan Jones reported the Cherokees are nearly all prisoners. They had been dragged from their houses and encamped at the forts and military places all over the nation. Multitudes were allowed no time to take anything with them except clothes they had on. Females are driven on foot before the bayonets of brutal men. It is the work of war in time of peace. So they don't even claim war. They don't even say we're going to fight for it. They don't even fight, but like cowards. But like cowards, they use trickery. Like the past president didn't even fight, nor did he give any credence to people who did. He called them stupid. And what he did instead was he used trickery to get what he wanted. That's what he did. He used trickery. Dismayed and in disbelief, the Cherokee wandered about the camps as if in a daze. Many of the white troops who guarded the Indians felt shamed by their duties. I later fought through the war between the states, wrote one infantryman, and I saw men shot to pieces by the thousands. But the Cherokee removal was the cruelest work I ever knew. And imagine, right? Just imagine then. There are lots of thoughts that are going through my head right now because this is the first time I'm reading this story. Although I knew, I didn't know details like this author, R. Conrad Stein, just needs to be given so much credit, especially considering that he made it his life's mission. He did this because he loved history. He didn't do it because he was a scholar. He did it because he loved history. So it is clear to me that this man made this his life's mission to tell these stories, and maybe even to tell these stories for this particular time right now. I'm reading through the stuff for history, and I'm finding out that what I have to do is I literally have to read between the lines. I said this many years, for many times throughout the years, but more when I'm talking politics, and so I don't say it as often. But what I learned from history, from all my history lessons, some of the things I've learned, one of the things that I learned was about Spain. And that Spain was, for longer than most of Europe, most of Western Europe, was under the control of it would have been a theocracy, right? Under the control of the church. And it was a dictatorship is what it was. So they dictated to the people what they had to do. So the type of government was the church, was a monarchy. And what they had to do was they had to listen to, or theocracy. What they had to do was it was a theocracy, so because it was the church. But they had to listen to that church. So it was a dictator. They dictated. It wasn't a democracy. All right? So, and there are two, this came from my political science class, and I'm not as just up on the two continuums. Spain or you can write me if you're still around and tell me those two continuums, because one would be, democracy to dictatorship, and the other one is theocracy to communism, is what I'm thinking. Or the extremes, right? So you can have a democracy where people are voting on a theocracy or an autocracy, right? One person in charge. But you can vote on it, so you can still have a democracy. Doesn't usually happen. If one person wants to be in charge, it's usually not voted on. He's pretty much like, I'm in charge now, the end. Kind of like our last president. I'm in charge now. The end. Yeah. Think about it. Think about it. And this goes to show you what ends up happening when you have individuals who say it's my way or the highway. We can see what the highway looked like, right? It's my way or the highway. Get on the highway. By the way, it's not a highway, and it's really cold, and you don't have shoes. The staging can't, and what I also wanted to say is this, is can you imagine the psychological effect that this had on those soldiers when somebody said, I saw men shot to pieces by the thousands, But the Cherokee removal was the cruelest work I ever saw. Who could be that cruel? Who could be that cruel? Somebody who doesn't look at it, doesn't look at their work, somebody who's in the White House, or wherever they live, right, can look at that. Somebody who's a backwoodsman, right, like Andrew Jackson was, doesn't have to consider other people. Somebody who believes in a hierarchy, right, where you are animals. And Andrew Jackson did believe all those things. And also, he's not sitting there watching this happen. He's not looking at it. He's sitting safe. He doesn't know the names of the people. He only knows he hates them. And that's the truth. You can see it in the behaviors here, treating them like animals, right? Okay, and it says, he thought nothing of them. The staging camps held an estimated 17,000 Cherokee. They included sick people, disabled people, elderly men and women, crying babies and children. Some were put on riverboats for the trip west. Others were led away from the camps in small parties. But the majority of Cherokee made the long, bitter walk to the west together along a path they called Nunadaul Sunyi. Nunadaul Sunyi. In the Cherokee language, this means the place where they cried. Trail of Tears. Nunadaul Sunyi. In the Cherokee language, this means the place where they cried. History would remember the trek as the Trail of Tears. On a June morning, a long, ragged column of Cherokee began their westward march. Some of the Indians rode horses or wagons, but the majority walked. A Cherokee named William Cootie later wrote, "Groups of persons formed about each wagon. The day was bright and beautiful, but a gloomy thoughtfulness was depicted in the lineaments of every face." Lines. The lines on every... I didn't have to do that. The lineaments of every face. Suddenly, a low sound of distant thunder fell on my ears. I don't know exactly if lineaments mean the lines, but because it's got the root word there, or it's got lines in it, it's probably got something to do with lines on the face, right? You can put that down there if you do a little bit of a lookup on lineaments and find out exactly what that means. Suddenly, a low sound of distant thunder fell on my ears. A dark spiral cloud was rising above the horizon and sent forth a murmur like a voice of divine indignation for the wrong of my poor and unhappy countrymen, driven by brutal power from all they loved and cherished in the land of their fathers. So this is what William Cootie is writing here. It's probably Coudet. That's probably what it is. William Coudet. Or I would guess that that's probably right. William Coudet. Groups of persons. So they're getting this writing from him. I want to read it again. This part. Suddenly a low sound of distant thunder fell on my ears. A dark spiral cloud was rising above the horizon and sent forth a murmur like a voice of divine indignation. Divine indignation is, divine is from God, right? So that would be divine. And indignation means you have no right. I have a right to tell you you have no right. That's divine indignation. I have the right to tell you you have no right. That's divine indignation. For the wrong of my poor and unhappy countrymen, driven by brutal power from all they loved and cherished in the land of their fathers. I hope that there was a thunder that recognized this trail of tears. I hope that there was a dark spiral cloud that they saw that recognized, that was some recognition of this trail of tears, even though there was nothing that history could do to stop it, to stop this terrible belief and hatred. There was nothing that history could do to stop it. I hope that there was a great thunder, and it was a distant thunder, and a spiral cloud recognizing that there was divine indignation in what they're making you do in history. You know, it's kind of like the story of Job. If you're interested in the Bible story of Job, it's a kind of the same story. I recognize the pain, and the pain is going to be an example for all people, and we're not going to rewrite history. We're not going to do it. We're not going to let them take away these stories because we know what you did. And the only reason why you want to take away these stories is because they are stories of your ancestors and you're embarrassed, or because you want something, or because you want something. You want something. Like they wanted that land, and they wanted that gold, and they wanted those metals. Behind the Cherokee spread the red Georgia clay and the land they had known for generations. Ahead lay an area in present-day Oklahoma that the people had never seen before. The government called the area Indian Territory. I didn't get to the picture there, to say the picture. This is a picture of the Trail of Tears by Robert Lindno. I think that that's French, is what I think it is. I think that Lindno is French, and so that would be a French, and you can see, because there would be French people still in this area. That was the Louisiana Purchase, right? So French fur traders may still be in the area, and apparently French artists as well, right? So check it out. And you know, my son used to always, and make fun of the French as far as war, having war knowledge, right? That they would be in these, whatever, purple linen suits, whatever, going to war. And, and even the redcoats, everyone could see you, bang, bang, right? Oh, you wanted to look good when you were going to war, but everyone could see you. It didn't make any sense, did it? As far as wartime goes. But interestingly, they were artists. And we know France and Paris for their art, right? Look at that. Isn't that interesting when we talk about roots of people? They were artists. That had to be. That sounds like a French name to me. What up? And now here's a map of showing the route of the Trail of Tears. I'll get a map up there for us that looks a little bit better than this one. Okay? Because I'm assuming this has got to be the line there. The other ones are the state lines. Obviously, we can see the state line, so this has got to be the line for the Trail of Tears. There's Kentucky, Indiana. So here we are. Here we're starting in Georgia. Here we're starting in Georgia. Nothing like not taking a direct route. In between stretched more than 800 miles of forest, mountain, swamps, and tortuous wilderness roads. Every day the sun raged like a branding iron in the heavens. The countryside suffered from drought. The Cherokee prayed for rain, but none came. Streams and creeks dried to sand, and the people's throats burned with thirst. Still they marched, and every step took them farther away from their homeland. Isn't this interesting? I mean, just the praying for rain, right? They're praying for rain. They're praying that the sun isn't beating and their prayers aren't being answered. Critical thinking going on right there. Diseases such as measles and whooping cough spread from one marcher to another, of course, because if they had all disease and they were sick, they were spreading that disease, right? Frontier settlers who saw the once proud Cherokee nation pass sadly in front of their homes wrote their relatives back east, the poor people, they are dying like flies. That's what a hierarchy brings. That's what eugenics. That's modern eugenics. This is at modern times, right? This is eugenics. This is eugenics. The early stages of getting rid of what they believe to be a drain on society, in particular the poor people. But the other thing about this that is so, to me, psychologically damaging is the pride of the Indian nation. Could you imagine? Could you imagine being the leader of the tribe and to the entire culture, populations, decimation, death, destruction, right? So it would be like George Washington, right? It would be like George Washington, and if George Washington was never successful, the kind of heaviness he would have on his heart as he watched his people die. Because you don't fight for a country if you aren't courageous and if you don't have pride. So it is watching also the diminishing pride of a people under the strong fist of white supremacy. There's no other way to say it. Streams and creeks dried to sand, and the people's throats burned with thirst. Still they marched, and every step took them farther away from their homeland. Diseases such as measles and whooping cough spread from one marcher to another. Frontier settlers who saw the once proud Cherokee nation pass sadly in front of their homes wrote their relatives back east. The poor people, they're down like flies. I just read all that. It's coming to my mind as well about these diseases that somehow the white people are not getting, but only so the smallpox, the Indians are getting, whooping cough, measles. They're getting extremely drunk on alcohol. So it's making it sound like they have got some weak immune systems or something. I don't believe that that's true. I believe that absolutely was medical warfare, chemical warfare, disease warfare, whatever you want to call that. It absolutely was, without a doubt. Winter struck. It was as cold and why? Because they would hold back diseases. They would make people march in the cruelest way. So even soldiers said, never seen anything so cruel. But they wouldn't use disease warfare. We already know they put blankets with smallpox. How do we not know that they brought all of those diseases? How do we not know? And what did they do? They would sick them on poor people. It was as cold and forbidding as the summer had been broiling, a howling wind engulfing the people in the snow and sleet. A traveler from the state of Maine passed a Cherokee camp and wrote home. Aging females, apparently nearly ready to drop into the grave, were traveling with heavy burdens attached to their backs on the frozen ground with no covering for their feet except what nature had given them. Which is the soles of their feet, by the way. If you didn't know what nature gave them, they didn't give them moccasins. Nature didn't give people moccasins. And that's what they're doing to aging women. The poor. We learned from the inhabitants on the road where the Indians passed that they buried 14 or 15 at each stopping place. Every time they stopped, 14 or 15 people they buried. The 800-mile journey was so harsh and difficult that a quarter of the marchers died along the route. 25%. They must have been a strong people, because 25% to me is nothing, right? Especially when you compare it to the colonists. The Indians were certainly more prepared. And the only reason that they likely lost 25%, which is such a fraction of what they were losing in Roanoke and Jonestown, the early colonists. This is crazy incredible. They knew those people would survive that walk, and they didn't want them to. So that's why they left with no provisions. That's why they were walking without shoes, because they knew that this strong nation of people would have survived. It took more than a year for all the people to travel the full length of the Trail of Tears and reach Oklahoma. It is estimated that 1 of every 4 of the Cherokees who started the 800-mile march from Georgia died along the route, 25%. The heartbreak of the Cherokee did not end with the Trail of Tears. The federal government had granted the land in Oklahoma to the Cherokee and the other Indian tribes for as long as the grass shall grow and the stream shall run. That's what they said before. Heard it! But just a few years after the Indians were resettled, white pioneers began to probe into their territory. The federal government did little to discourage them. After the Civil War, the white invaders became a horde. Parcel by parcel, the federal government bought up or seized Indian territory and opened it officially to white farmers. By the turn of the century, the Indian nations in Oklahoma held almost no land at all. In Georgia, the Cherokee people had been completely eradicated. A few hundred Cherokee had avoided General Scott's roundup by hiding in the hills. One of them, a man named Solly, became a legend. Even today, the Cherokee tell his story. Solly killed a white soldier after he saw the soldier jabbing a bayonet in Solly's wife. General Scott, the officer in charge, knew it would be difficult to capture Solly and to flush out the hundreds of other Cherokee who resisted migration by living in caves. So Scott sent word to Solly that if he would give himself up, the army would abandon its efforts to find other Indians hiding in the hills. Solly agreed to the terms and surrendered to Scott. He was sentenced to death for killing the soldier. On a warm summer morning, Solly faced a firing squad. As a final act of cruelty, the army forced Cherokee prisoners to serve as his executioners. Solly refused a blindfold. Instead, he spent his final instant on this earth gazing at the red clay of the old Cherokee nation. It is said that his last words were, "It is sweet to die in one's own country." Here are the photo credits, so there are photo credits there as well, if you want to take a look at them. All right, folks, we're a little late. I have to get on for critical thinking in 8 minutes. So I might be a little bit late for that classroom. I want to put some coffee on. We'll talk about the Trail of Tears when we get back, and then we're here for U.S. presidents. Thanks for joining me. That was a little bit of a stomach turner, wasn't it? Thanks for